the TRG or whatever, the SWAT team, whoever comes in and storms the building, there's a high probability they're going to die. So they don't want to do that. So what they're doing is, okay, how do I preserve my life?
Warning: Damian Andrews' growing revenue and profit, if implemented, will put more money in your pocket. Please use with caution.
Damian Andrews here for growing revenue and profit, and we're talking about negotiation. I love the discussions that you see out there, and they give different analogies as to how to negotiate. And one of my favorites is the hostage negotiation, and they talk about how in a hostage negotiation, the skills that you have there are really good because you can't actually break apart a person to hand over part of that. And it sounds really fabulous and wonderful as a negotiating tactic. But what it doesn't take into account is that the situational power. Now, in Negotiation Magic, which is a program that we have, we talk a lot about the different sources of power. And situational power is massive. It's really, really huge. And when you break it down, a hostage negotiation usually comes about out of an emotional situation. What's generally happened is someone has had a plan to do something, rob a bank, for example, and it hasn't gone to plan. So what they intended to do, rob the bank, get away with the cash, all smoothly. It hasn't gone to plan. They are now stuck. And that process of situational power is very much then in the favor of the hostage negotiator in that circumstance, because the person that went in and robbed the bank, they very rarely want to die. And that's probably the outcome that they've got facing them if things get really, really difficult, so to speak. If the TRG or whatever, the SWAT team, whoever comes in and storms the building, there's a high probability they're going to die. So they don't want to do that. So what they're doing is, okay, how do I preserve my life? Now, also too, there's that situation of it's highly, highly emotional to start with. And that's part of that hostage negotiator's power. That situational power is taking time, which is another source of power as well, is taking the time to allow things to calm down, to allow the situation to eventually resolve itself. And that is also an advantage to the hostage negotiator because people get hungry as time goes on. In those situations, they need food, they want to move on, there's things that have got to happen. So as that time moves forward, that time power, then that puts it again more in the favor of a hostage negotiator. But the key thing, the key source of power that the person that is the hostage taker is missing is options. Options are a massive source of power. And that's in that circumstance. So when we're talking about that situation where situational power comes in, so there's a number of factors here to take into account. And that situational power that the hostage negotiator has links back to the hostage taker not having many other options, very few options, certainly if they want to walk away with their life. And these are massive, massive motivators. So combine that with time, then the hostage taker's desire to live and all the other factors, the lack of options as well, creates a circumstance where the outcome is pretty much set. If you manage it the right way, handle things calmly, eventually it's going to resolve itself where the hostage taker is going to surrender and things are going to move forward from there. So it all sounds really, really fabulous as an example, but the reality is those same circumstances or that same situation in any other different situation in a business setting, for example, is not going to play out the same way. So those skills are not necessarily, well, they're not going to work in that situation. Because think about that. In a business situation, are you in a life or death situation? Very, very rarely. I would say not at all, certainly in the modern developed worlds. And That makes that situation completely different if you're in that business negotiation. So as if you're the hostage negotiator, so to speak, using that tactic of, oh, we'll wait them out. Well, you can wait them out, but they're going to move on to someone else. They have many, many, many more options available to you. And so this is where it's nice to have these wonderful examples of, be a hostage negotiator, use the skills of a hostage negotiator in business. But the reality is that's a nice story, but it's not reality. But there are other options. There's lots of options in negotiating. And that's where Negotiation Magic, the program that we have, there are 36 negotiating principles that you can draw upon in business settings that work in business settings to succeed. And that also works with family as well. Believe it or not, it does actually work very well with family. There's at least 16 sources of power. We have a couple of bonus sources of power, but there's 16 primary sources of power. There's 19 tactics that you can use and counter tactics, and there's some additional ones that we've thrown in on top of that. But again, 19 core tactics. There's some new ones being developed. When people come up with a new negotiating tactic, we come up with a counter tactic. So they're constantly evolving. And then the big one is there's 37 mistakes to avoid. This is really, really critical. You want to avoid those mistakes because it's really going to affect your ability to negotiate. If you're making mistakes, it's going to make your negotiation not very effective. So there are things that you want to do. So there's 36 principles of negotiation, at least 16 sources of power, 16 main ones, and there's some bonus ones that we throw in, but we don't really talk about them much, but they're very, very powerful. 19 tactics and counter tactics, and 37 mistakes to avoid. So just think about that when you're looking at the negotiation discussions out there. Is that circumstance that they're talking about relevant to your circumstance, which is a big one? And certainly a hostage negotiation situation, yes, is very highly emotional. It takes very good skill to work its way through. But in reality, it's not the same in business. And those tactics will not work effectively in a business situation, certainly against someone that knows the setting that they're in and how to use that. So this is Damien Andrews for Growing Revenue and Profit, sharing details of negotiation magic and how to succeed with negotiations.